Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just let people pour in here. I am Dr. Ted Barnett, president and founder of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, and I am so excited that so many people have signed up for tonight's presentation with Brenda Davis. We have people from all over the planet signed up. Very excited about that. We just went over 100. That's good. I'm going to share my screen here. And now that it looks like everybody's in the room, once again, I am Dr. Ted Barnett, president and founder of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. And I would like to welcome you to the June lecture in our Lifestyle as Medicine lecture series with Brenda Davis. And the title is Plant-Powered Protein. And let us go to the next slide. So we will get through with our introductions by 7:35, probably a little bit quicker than that. Brenda's presentation is going to be close to an hour. So we're going to be off of that agenda a little bit, I think, already. Probably we'll get to the Q&A by 8:25 or 8:30, but we will move into the lobby at 8:30 for another 15 minutes, during which time we will have time for Q&A. So please type in the Q&A if you have questions you would like to have answered by Brenda, and you can also use the chat section for putting in greetings and sharing thoughts and information. In fact, we'd love it if you type in the chat where in the world you're from. That's always very interesting and fun. We will have one of our medical students who will be helping with the Q&A when it's time for that. So we run 3 programs which are all certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Pivio, which used to be called the Complete Health Improvement Program. You can see we have some information sessions coming up in August. These are all available on our website, either on the calendar or in the footer of most of the web pages. The LIFT project, we have another start of that on July 18th at 6:30. That's a 10-week program that meets for an hour a week, and it's designed to lift your mood with lifestyle medicine. Very exciting program, lots of fun. And then our own flagship program, the 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart, which we consider the prescription for chronic disease. We have information sessions coming up on Thursday, June 22nd, which is next week, and then Wednesday, July 19th, and program start dates, Sunday, July 9th, and Saturday, August 12th. We run the Jumpstart program every month, and so far over 1,800 people have gone through the program from over 44 states and about 9 countries. So again, plant-powered protein, with our lecturer, Brenda Davis, who is a world-leading plant-based pioneer and an internationally acclaimed speaker. Brenda has been a featured speaker at medical, nutrition, and dietetic conferences in 25 countries on 6 continents. As a prolific nutrition writer, Brenda has authored or co-authored 13 books with nearly 1 million copies in print in 15 languages. Her latest book, Plant-Powered Protein, was hot off the press in April 2023. Brenda has also authored and co-authored numerous professional and lay articles and is a past chair of the Vegetarian Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group of the American Dietetic Association. And Brenda was the lead dietitian in a diabetes intervention research project in the Marshall Islands. On her last trip there in November of 2017, she developed a nutrition education curriculum for kindergarten through grade 6 and trained teachers in all public schools. Brenda was the 7th recipient of the Plantrition Project Luminary Award in 2022 and was inducted into the Vegetarian Hall of Fame in 2007. I'm very proud to be able to call Brenda a good friend and someone who I've spent lots of time with in the past, including a very memorable afternoon going up and down a water slide. So I'm going to, that was in Arizona. So Brenda, could you please reveal yourself? Let's turn on your video and unmute yourself.
There we go.
And it's so good to have you. Thank you for joining us, Brenda.
Well, thanks so much, Ted. It's just exciting to be here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I will get right into it because I have a lot of slides. Should I just get going?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead and start sharing, please.
Okay. So everybody can see my slides.
Looks great.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so my topic for this evening is plant-powered protein. And I'll start with just a very quick overview. First, we'll talk a little bit about historical perspectives. We'll just dabble in the science, just a touch. And then we'll spend a fair bit of time looking at protein quality. Can we get all the essential amino acids we need from plants? We'll review some of the assessment tools used to determine protein quality. And then we'll move on to protein quantity. Can we get enough protein from plants? And we'll look at recommended and actual intakes and ensuring sufficient protein. And we'll talk a little bit about the safety of soy. And then we'll address any possible advantages to plant versus animal protein. And we will conclude the presentation by looking at the benefits of plant protein beyond human health. So first, I love this. Benjamin Franklin once said that there are only two certainties in life: death and taxes. We've all heard that many times. But for plant-based eaters, I'm pretty sure there's a third. Getting asked the question, where do you get your protein? We've all been asked it time and time again. And I do love this cartoon by Bizarro Comics. The little rodent saying to the big muscular gorilla, "No meat at all. Are you sure you're getting enough protein?" And the point here being that we have a very strong cultural bias towards meat being the only real source of protein. Few people actually realize that plant foods provide ample protein for people. While legumes are the most concentrated plant protein sources, grains actually provide about half of the world's protein. So how did animal protein acquire such a health halo? Well, if you look back at public health history, for many years, hunger and malnutrition were the most serious public health nutrition concerns. And malnutrition was due to food shortages and limited diets centered around starchy staples such as potatoes or rice. Government policies at the time were directed towards the elimination of hunger and deficiency diseases. And nutrition education campaigns were dominated by what we call eat more messages. And protein was really a primary focus. As animal products are very concentrated protein sources, they were considered a critical part of the hunger and malnutrition problem. And you can see some of the old advertising: drink more milk for your health, meat in the meal for health defense. And it really elevated their status and led to economic policies that sought to maximize meat and milk production. We had farmer subsidies, marketing support, and price controls that were all set in place. In addition, protein quality assessment tools favored animal products over plant foods as determinants of protein quality, were based at that time largely on the needs of baby rats. So animal products acquired a bit of a health halo. Meat became synonymous with good nutrition and big muscles, and dairy was associated with strong, healthy bones. And diseases of nutritional deficiency did diminish, and the interests of animal agriculture became pretty deeply entrenched in the economy. It appeared as though the job of improving health through nutrition was effectively accomplished. However, while diseases of nutritional deficiency diminished, the eat more messages gave rise to an epidemic of overconsumption. The very policies intended to combat malnutrition introduced major threats to health. And the threats came in the form of overweight, obesity, heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and many cancers. And a lot of people don't realize when you think of malnutrition, often you think of hunger or undernutrition, but there are actually 3 types of malnutrition, and that's just one. The second is micronutrient deficiencies like vitamin A deficiency resulting in blindness, or vitamin D deficiency resulting in rickets. But the third is overconsumption. And overconsumption now exceeds undernutrition as the #1 form of malnutrition globally. Over 70% of American adults are either overweight or obese. And Western diets that are rich in highly processed foods and animal products are the most strongly implicated. Diseases linked to overconsumption are responsible for about 70% of deaths worldwide. So the health halo is starting to fade. National and international dietary guidelines are shifting and are now advocating well-designed plant-based diets. And these kinds of diets accomplish two things. They ensure adequate nutrition at every stage of the life cycle, and they also minimize the risk of our biggest killers. So let's move on to a little bit about protein science. So what are proteins anyway? Well, they're very large, complex molecules. They're actually one of 3 macronutrients, which is nutrients we need in large amounts. Of course, the other 2 being carbohydrates and fats. And proteins are made of long strands of amino acids that are linked together by peptide bonds. There are 20 amino acids used to make proteins in the body, and 9 of these are considered indispensable or essential, meaning that we can't make them in our bodies. We have to get them from food. And this is just an example of a protein in our body called insulin. So why do we need protein? Well, we need protein for our body structure. It's a component. Protein is a component of many body tissues like muscles and vital organs, but also bones and collagen and blood and skin and hair and nails. It's important for body function. Proteins have very specific tasks in the body. They can act as transporters, messengers, enzymes, and even several hormones are essentially protein. Protein is essential for fluid and electrolyte balance, for pH balance, for growth, for maintenance, and to provide the body with energy. So when it comes to plant protein, there are really 2 key issues. The first is quality. Can we get all of those indispensable or essential amino acids from plants? And the second is quantity. Can we get enough protein from plants? So let's dig into protein quality. Protein quality, for many years, the subject of protein quality, evolved around the ability of dietary protein sources to meet human needs for metabolism, growth, and the maintenance of body tissues. This was determined by 2 factors: the essential amino acid content of a food relative to human needs, and the second was the digestibility of the essential amino acids from the food. And animal proteins were generally viewed as superior or complete or high quality because they contain a lot of essential amino acids and they're highly digestible. Plant proteins were viewed as inferior or incomplete or low quality, as some plant proteins are low in 1 or more essential amino acids relative to human needs, and they have a slightly lower digestibility generally than animal products. But if we dare to look through a wider lens, we see something a little different. What we often ignore in this discourse is that food sources of high quality proteins are actually associated with higher rates of mortality and chronic disease, while those that are considered lower quality are associated with more favorable health outcomes. In addition, the so-called high-quality animal protein foods have a detrimental impact on the environment, leaving a much larger carbon footprint than plant protein foods. So I would ask this question: is it time that scientists actually redefine protein quality? And my answer would be absolutely yes. We've got to weave in the health and ecological impacts of various protein sources. Protein quality is a function of amino acid profile and digestibility, protein bioavailability, in other words, but it's also a function of impact on morbidity and mortality and carbon footprint and its environmental cost. If we look at the standard tools for assessing amino acid profile and digestibility, PER was used for years. It's still used as the main, quality score in Canada. It's based on the ability of protein sources to support the growth of baby rats. And it underestimates plant protein quality because baby rats grow very rapidly and they have fur. So they need more sulfur-containing amino acids, which we find more of in animal products. And then we have what we call the PDCAAS score, the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. And it's based on how much protein and constituent amino acids go in the mouth and how much end up in the feces. And again, it has flaws, largely because there's some that gets used by bacteria as well, which isn't accounted for in that score. And then we've got the DS, or the digestible indispensable amino acid score. And generally it's based on a quality and digestibility of a food for pigs. And the foods, often legumes and grains, are provided to pigs in the raw form. And whereas humans consume them in a cooked form, especially those foods in particular. And then we've got something called the true ileal digestibility. And fortunately, this particular quality score has tested certain foods on humans using foods prepared as humans would consume them. So, for example, cooked legumes and cooked grains. And using this method, absorption of different foods appears to vary by just a few percentage points, including those of plant foods. So what is the RDA for essential or indispensable amino acids? Well, what I want to point out here, even though there's a lot here, is that as we get older, our requirements for essential amino acids decline somewhat because we're not growing in the same way, or hopefully not. Preschool children require, you can see the amounts, like lysine, 58 milligrams per gram of protein, methionine and cysteine, 28 grams per milligram per gram of protein. In pregnancy, it's a little lower, but it's still much higher than it is for adults. For children, it's lower still. As they get older, it's lower still. And then for adults, it would be the lowest. So you see for lysine at 58 milligrams per gram of protein, it's only 38 for adults. And so can we get all of the essential amino acids we need from plants? The answer is absolutely yes. Animals, this comes as a big surprise to a lot of people, don't actually make essential amino acids. It's why they're essential. They can't make them. They're made by plants. So it makes no sense to think we can't get them from plants. It's where they come from. So all plants contain all 9 essential amino acids. We get essential amino acids from plants either directly or indirectly, directly by eating plants or indirectly by eating animals that ate plants, or very indirectly by eating animals that ate other animals that ate plants. They come from plants. That's the key point. Now, a lot of people wonder if we need to do this, sort of complementing of plant proteins, because grains tend to be low in lysine and beans tend to be a little low in methionine. Do we have to eat them together to get the so-called complete protein? And in fact, we don't. We thought this years ago. It was in the early 1980s that we believed vegetarians needed to combine foods, but we learned very quickly this was not necessary. We now know that any excesses consumed in one meal are stored in protein pools that can be drawn upon for the next if all we ate was grains at one meal and legumes at the other. We can actually get sufficient essential amino acids from plants simply by eating a variety of plants over the course of the day and eating enough calories. Regularly including legumes helps to ensure needs are met throughout the life cycle. And I want to show you this because I want you to get a good idea of what we're talking about when we say, a plant source of protein may be low in one or more essential amino acids. So I'm going to show you 6 foods, and for each food, if the amino acid has a little yellow bar around it, it means that it is low, that amino acid is low per gram of protein for a preschool child. If it has a red bar around it, it means it's low for both preschool children and adults. And so let's go to looking at wheat. You can see that wheat has enough of all of the essential amino acids, with the exception of lysine. There is 22 milligrams of lysine per gram of protein. Adults need 38, preschool children need 58. So if all you ate was wheat and you ate nothing else, adults would need about twice as much protein from wheat. Like let's say you needed 50 grams of protein and all you ate was wheat, you'd have to eat close to 100 grams of protein to meet your lysine requirements. And for preschool children, it would be almost triple. Now for pumpkin seeds, all of the amino acids are there in adequate amounts for adults. They're a little bit low for preschool children at 41 milligrams per gram of protein. And as you recall, they need 58. Soybeans contain every essential amino acid for all ages, with the exception of preschool children. But what I want you to notice is that soybeans are low in methionine and cysteine at 27 milligrams per gram of protein. What children need would be 28. So let's say a preschool child needs 13 grams of protein and all they eat is soybeans. To get that 13 grams, they would need 6.5 tablespoons of soybeans, but they'd still be a little bit low in methionine and cysteine. They would actually have to eat 7 tablespoons to get enough methionine and cysteine, so an extra half a tablespoon. So just to put it in perspective, really. And then quinoa, same story. There are no amino acids lacking for adults. The only amino acid lacking for a preschool child is lysine, but it's so close. It's 54 and a preschool child needs 58. So they would have to have an extra couple of tablespoons if that was the only food they ate. Black beans, very similar story, a little bit low in methionine and cysteine, but there's nothing lacking for adults. For preschool children at 26 milligrams per gram of protein, it's about 2 milligrams short of their requirement. So again, they need a couple of extra tablespoons to meet their needs if that was the only food they were eating. Now, almonds, a little bit of a different story. You can see the red bars around lysine and around methionine and cysteine. So it's a low in both of those amino acids for both adults and preschool children. Now, to put this all into perspective, if an adult's daily requirement is 60 grams of protein, that person would get all the necessary protein and amino acids from eating just one of these foods: 2 cups of soybeans, 4 cups of black beans, 1.5 cups of pumpkin seeds, 3/4 pound burger patties, 10 eggs, or 8 cups of milk. So you can see you're getting all the essential amino acids, all of the necessary protein from any one of those foods. But we do need to recognize that protein digestibility is reduced by fiber, and fiber is present in all whole plant foods. It actually carries a small percent of protein from food through the gastrointestinal system, and it's excreted in our stool. Trypsin inhibitors can block the action of trypsin, which is one of the main enzymes that breaks down protein so we can absorb the amino acids. Tannins, a type of polyphenolic compound found in a number of foods, but especially in tea. Phytates, major storage form of phosphorus in plants, but really concentrated in wheat bran. Lectins, these are proteins that bind to carbohydrates, concentrated in raw legumes and other foods. And then the Maillard reaction can cause cross-linkages of protein that can reduce lysine availability by up to 30%. Now, we can increase the digestibility by breaking down fibers. If we grind, blend, or use food processing techniques that reduce particle size, we free up the protein for absorption. So the protein absorption improves substantially. Removing or reducing fiber through refining, by reducing or eliminating trypsin inhibitors and lectins simply by cooking. So if we cook legumes, if we cook grains, we're reducing or completely eliminating the trypsin inhibitors and lectins. And then we can reduce phytates by soaking, sprouting, fermenting, leavening foods. And so if we look at the protein digestibility of these, either foods that are a little lower in fiber, have the fiber removed, or have been blended, like peanut butter, for example, you're looking at about 92 to 96% digestibility. That's very close to what it is for animal products. Now, if we look at other plant foods, like whole plant foods, like oatmeal and lentils and legumes, we're looking at about 10 to 15 or so percent reduced digestibility from these high fiber foods. So you might wonder, do people eating plant-based need extra protein to compensate for the lower digestibility of protein in plants? And so we'll address that question in our next section, where we look at the quantity of protein. Can plants actually provide enough protein? And the answer is absolutely positively yes. Even the largest mammals on the planet get enough protein from plants to build very big muscles. And people can too. We're puny by comparison. But even competitive bodybuilders can seem to manage to build huge muscles without any meat. So what is the RDA for protein? Well, the RDA is determined in terms of grams per kilogram body weight. And if you recall, a kilogram is 2.2 pounds. And so the requirement for infants begin at about 1.5 grams per kilogram, and it goes down to 1.2 during the second half of the first year of life. And then for children, it's about 1 gram per kilogram body weight, a little higher for toddlers or 1 to 3-year-olds. About 1.05, and then it's down to 0.95, but it's essentially 1 for most of childhood. For teens, it's about 0.85, for adults, 0.8, and it does go up considerably during pregnancy and lactation, 1.1 for pregnant women, 1.3 during lactation. And then the other way we can look at it is in terms of grams per day, but the RDA in grams per day only it is really specific to a reference body weight. And of course, these reference body weights would have to be adjusted for individuals. But one thing that people really need to know is that your protein requirement or your estimated requirement is actually based on your healthy body weight. So if you're overweight, you need to, figure out what your truly ideal body weight would be. And that's what you determine your protein needs based on. And even pregnancy, it's based on your pre-pregnancy healthy body weight. So it's around 10 grams during infancy. It's around 13 to 34 during childhood. It's about 13 for toddlers and about 34 for older children. And then during our teen years and our adult years, it ranges from about 46 to 56 grams a day. During pregnancy and lactation, it ranges from 63 to 75. Now, one thing that is important to know is that the recommended dietary allowance is really the average daily level of intake, sufficient to meet the nutrient requirements of nearly all healthy people, 97 to 98% of the population. The RDA for protein is set at about 25% higher than average biological requirements. So it's a pretty safe number generally. But there are special considerations for whole food plant-based eater, pregnant and lactating women, children, athletes, and seniors. And so we'll take a look at each of those quickly. So for whole food plant-based eaters, there is no separate RDA for people eating plant-based. But because fiber in plant cell walls reduces protein digestibility, some experts suggest adding 10% to the RDA for adults and for teenagers even. To help compensate for the losses and for the reduced protein digestibility. This is somewhat controversial. It isn't always necessary, and it's certainly not necessary for those who regularly eat low fiber foods like tofu and soy milk and plant-based meat alternatives, nut and seed butters, those kinds of foods. Or for plant-based eaters who do consume some animal products like dairy and eggs, so for lacto-ovo vegetarians, for example. Now, for pregnant and lactating women, the RDA is actually close to 50% higher than for non-pregnant, non-lactating women. And the RDA is, as I mentioned, based on pre-pregnancy healthy body weight. It's 1.1 grams per day during pregnancy, but we might up that to 1.2 for people eating very high fiber whole food plant-based diets. And it's 1.3 during lactation, so we might increase that to 1.4 for whole food plant-based eaters. Another way of approximating protein requirement is just to add 25 grams per day for non-pregnant to the non-pregnant protein requirement. That might be increased to 28 for people eating a lot of high fiber whole plant foods. And of course, it's 50 grams for those expecting twins that you would add to your non-pregnant requirement, or possibly 55 for whole food plant-based eaters. Now, for children who eat whole food plant-based diets, an adjustment beyond 10% is often recommended, and some experts suggest 30% for toddlers, 20% for 4 to 8-year-olds, and 15% for 9 to 13-year-olds. And again, 10% is probably enough, or even no increase at all for those children who are regularly using those lower fiber foods, and for plant predominant children who regularly do consume some animal products. So the protein RDA would look like this. For if we add on those numbers, it would be close to 1.4 for 1 to 3-year-old children, 1.14 for older children, around the 1 gram per kilogram for teens, and about 0.9 or 0.88, 0.9 for adults, and it would go up to 1.2 and 1.4 for pregnant and lactating women. And if we look at that in terms of grams per day, for young children, we're looking at around the 20 grams a day. For older children, close to 40, and for adults and teens, it would be closer to 50 to 60 grams per day. And during pregnancy and lactation, closer to 70 to 80 grams a day. Now, for athletes, there is no separate RDA, but 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight are generally recommended by sports and nutrition authorities, depending on training. Endurance athletes needing, closer to the lower end of that spectrum, and strength athletes needing closer to the higher end of that spectrum. So if getting enough protein is actually not as difficult for athletes as a lot of people think it is. Let's say an athlete needs 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, and that athlete weighs 70 kilos or 154 pounds, they would need about 105 grams of protein per day. But for an athlete consuming 3,000 calories, which would be pretty typical, that would amount to 14% of calories from protein, which is relatively easy to achieve on any varied, nutritious plant-based diet. Especially one that, people are thinking more about protein when they're athletes anyway, so they're going to be fairly conscious of including enough legumes and tofu and things like that. So what about branched chain amino acids? Branched chain amino acids include leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And these amino acids stimulate protein synthesis in skeletal muscle and in other tissues. They inhibit muscle loss and improve recovery, with leucine probably playing the most important role. Plant-based athletes can get enough leucine and other branched chain amino acids from legumes, soy foods, wheat gluten, which is seitan, veggie meats, seeds, nuts, grains, although they are less concentrated than the branched chain amino acids in animal products. So how much leucine do they need? Well, adults need 42 milligrams of leucine per kilogram body weight per day. So that would amount to just under 3,000 milligrams of leucine. But some sports authorities suggest 700 to 3,000 milligrams every 3 to 4 hours, or with each meal, basically. But I just did some calculations, from the USDA database, and looked at, a typical athlete who might consume a cup of soy milk, a cup of oats, a cup of tofu, a cup of beans, a cup of quinoa, 2 slices of bread, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, and a smoothie, 3 cups of a, relatively high protein smoothie. And you can see the amounts of protein from each on the right-hand side. And the amount of leucine they would get by consuming those foods, which is, certainly not that generous, is almost 9,000 milligrams. So really not not so difficult to meet those recommended intakes. And plant-based protein can be just as good as animal-based protein for building and maintaining muscle mass. We have a 2023 study, it's a small study, 22 adults, that reported comparable protein synthesis rates and skeletal muscle hypertrophy or growth in those consuming high protein omnivorous or non-animal sources of protein. There was a meta-analysis in 2018 of 9 studies comparing soy to animal protein sources, and they reported that the soy protein produced similar muscle gains and strength as animal protein sources such as whey. And then a study of almost 3,000 adults in 2017 looked at people consuming different dietary patterns, and they found muscle mass and quadriceps strength were positively associated with total protein intake, but plant and animal protein sources were equally effective in promoting muscle mass and strength. And the guy pictured to the left here is Naimi Delgado, and he's been vegetarian from birth. He's never eaten meat in his life, and he's been vegan since 2015. So I think that picture says a lot. So can plant protein sources offer any advantages for athletes? And I think this is really important. Plant-based protein sources can improve circulation, they can reduce inflammation, they can lower oxidative stress, they can promote a healthy gut microbiome, they can enhance glycogen stores and support leaner body weights, which are all very good things for athletes. And the proof is in the plant-powered champions. And I think one of the most impressive is Scott Urich. He's a world champion ultramarathon runner who has won multiple races. And he actually set the American 24-hour record with 165.7 miles, which is 6.3 marathons in 24 hours. It's unbelievable. He's been 100% plant-based since 1999. Julia Hubbard, who's a world champion bodybuilder and sprint champion as well. Plant-based since 2015, vegetarian since 1990. And then we've got Novak Djokovic. And I mean, I don't even have to say anything about him. Everybody knows who he is. He just claimed his 23rd Grand Slam title, the most major singles trophies in the history of the sport. And he has been 100% plant-based since 2015. And then Sonia Looney, a good friend of mine, who's a world champion ultra-endurance mountain biker, first woman ever to finish a 10-day race across Annapurna in Nepal, and a 2015 world champion, and now has 2 children. But she has been 100% plant-based since 2014. And as a matter of fact, I have to tell you, when she went plant-based, she was really nervous that it would affect her performance. And she was in the top 20 in the world at that time. Within 6 months, she won the world championships. So again, that tells you something. Patrick Babomian, world champion strongman, holds the world record for log lift, 100% plant-based since 2011. Tia Blanco, world champion surfer, 2015-16 world champion title, 100% plant-based since 2013, vegetarian from birth. Then there's Matt Danzig, martial artist mixed champion. He was the winner of The Ultimate Fighter in season 6, 100% plant-based since 2004. So that, I think, says it all. Moving on to seniors, we don't have a separate RDA for seniors in North America, although they do in Australia and in a few European countries as well. But the consensus is building that higher intakes may be needed. Achieving greater intakes can be challenging as energy intakes, it's not like athletes. Energy intakes are typically reduced in the senior population. And aging bodies metabolize and absorb protein less efficiently. Muscle protein synthesis is reduced in seniors. So adequate protein can help seniors reduce age-related muscle loss, preserve mobility and function, improve recovery from illness, and possibly delay bone loss as well. This is my 81-year-old writing partner and plant protein co-author, Vasanto Molina. She's been plant-based for 45 years. And although energy needs decline, protein needs can increase by about 25%. And experts commonly recommend 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight for seniors. And again, some very whole food, plant-based, high fiber eaters may want to add 10% to that. And an intake of at least 700 milligrams of leucine per meal is also often suggested. Intakes of 60 to 80 grams of protein per day, depending on body weight and health status, may be well advised for a lot of seniors, and it would mean about 20 to 25 grams of protein per meal. Average adult requirements are 46 grams for women, 56 grams for men. If we add 10%, that's 50 grams for women, 62 for men. So how much do people actually consume? Well, based on 7 different studies, average intakes in meat eaters are 92 grams a day, vegetarians 76, and vegans 72. So all well above those recommended numbers, even when we add that 10%, if that's necessary. It's not always. I know it's not. I don't think it's necessary for myself because I do consume, unsweetened soy milk and tofu and nut butters on a pretty regular basis. And I think most people do that sort of thing. So what about in infants and toddlers? Do they get enough protein? Well, Veggie is probably the biggest study we have on that topic. They looked at 431 to 3-year-old children, and the average intakes were 2.7 grams per kilogram per day in omnivores, 2.3 in lacto-ovo-vegetarians, and 2.4 in vegans. And if you recall, the RDA is 1.05 for children of that age. They were all over double the recommended intake. So how about in older children? Well, again, we have the Veggie Youth Study, 401 6 to 18-year-olds, and the average intakes were 1.3 grams per kilogram in omnivores, 1.16 or 1.14 in lacto-ovo and 1.16 in vegans. And if you remember, the RDA is 0.85 for teens and 0.95 for children. So they were all well above that as well. So where do we get protein in plant foods? Well, if you look at the amount in, a cup of soybeans, 31, 3 ounces of veggie meat, 20 to 25, a cup of legumes, 16 to 18, basically, a half a cup of tofu, 15 to 20. So you're looking at, from these kinds of foods, a range of 15 to 30 grams. That's exactly the same as what you would get from 3 ounces of meat, poultry, or fish. Then if you look at other plant foods like whole grains, a cup of kamut berries or spelt or wheat berries, 10 to 12 grams, a quarter cup of hemp seeds, 13, a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds, 10. So you're getting, this amount of protein from a number of plant foods, which is very similar to the amount that you would get from 2 eggs or a cup of milk or an ounce of cheese. Humans need about 10 to 15% of calories from protein. So that's another way of looking at the amounts of protein. And if you look at the percentages of calories in plant foods, you can see veggie meat is about 30 to 65% of calories from protein. Soybeans, tofu, and tempeh, about 35 to 44% of calories from protein. Other legumes, about 20 to 30% of calories from protein. Seeds, about 11 to 24. Non-starchy vegetables range from about 10 to 40%. Grains from about 7 to 17%. Nuts, 8 to 14. Starchy vegetables and fruits are really the only 2 categories that fall sort of often below that 10%, with starchy vegetables at about 7 to 12 and fruits at about 2 to 12. And so if we look at, ground beef versus spinach, for example, ground beef has 39% of calories from protein. A patty has about 22 grams of protein. Spinach has about 39% of calories from protein, exactly the same as beef. So sometimes people say, well, see, they have the same amount. But what a lot of people forget to mention is that you would need 25 cups of raw spinach to get 22 grams of protein. So although, the calories from protein are high, the calories in spinach are so low that you'd have to eat a truckload of the stuff to get enough protein. It's a different story for tofu. So tofu has about 41% of calories from protein. So just over a half a cup would give you 22 grams of protein. So that's why we need to be a little bit conscious about including these more concentrated sources in the diet. So plant-based eaters generally get enough protein unless they don't get enough calories. And that we see sometimes for small children eating very bulky diets and they just can't eat enough food. People with eating disorders, people who are sick, people who are poor, have food insecurity. Sometimes we see insufficient protein in diets that are very poorly balanced, high fat, high sugar, junk food diets, tea and toast diets, fruitarian diets may not provide enough protein. Or they just fail to meet the increased needs, like seniors with low energy intakes or poor appetite, pregnant women with morning sickness, for example. So how can we ensure sufficient protein in plant-exclusive diets? Well, very simply by providing sufficient calories, by including a wide variety of plant foods, by eating some protein-rich choice with each meal, like beans or lentils or split peas, tofu, tempeh, edamame, or other soy foods, seeds, nuts, seitan, veggie meats, if you like to include them, and include some lower fiber choices in the mix, especially for children and seniors. And also by selecting milks that are a little higher in protein, you know, almond milk and hemp milk, and some of these milks can be very low in protein, cashew milk and so on, but the soy milk and pea milk tend to have a lot more protein, 6 to 10 grams per cup. So if we select those, it will boost protein nicely. Also by aiming for 3 or more servings of legumes a day, and it doesn't have to all be in terms of bowls of beans. It can be, you know, some tofu or soy milk or some peanut butter or other nut butters. We can get inspired by cultures that rely on legumes as daily staples, like you know, Asian cuisine, African, Central and South American, Indian, Middle Eastern. If you look at African or American intakes, they average 9.3 grams, which is less than a tablespoon of legumes per day, or a tenth that of many other nations. It's unbelievable. We can add protein at breakfast if we so choose by choosing the higher protein milks for our smoothies and cereals, by sprinkling some hemp seeds or other seeds, nuts, etc. in breakfast bowls, by using lentils and higher protein whole grains for breakfast bowls, by, you know, doing a tofu or pumpkin seed scramble. This scramble here on the top left is actually a pumpkin seed scramble I made. By making lentil crepes with different fillings. They are amazing. It's just lentils and water, that's all it is, blended and cooked like a pancake. Baked beans, nutter seed butters, hummus, or smoked tofu on toast, all good choices. We can add it to lunch and dinner, beans, lentils, split peas with soups or stews, tofu or hummus and sandwiches and wraps, stir fries and Buddha bowls with all of those things, stuffed sweet potatoes, peppers or squash, bean or lentil loaf with gravy, burgers, tortillas, tacos, pasta dishes with lentils, you know, baked tofu or tempeh, all of those things. We can even add it to desserts if we're so inclined. You know, puddings made with chia seeds and hemp seeds and soy milk or soft tofu, black beans or chickpeas and cookies and bars, nuts and seeds and tofu and cheesecakes, Asian style red bean desserts we can do. We can select more protein in our snacks, hummus and veggies, edamame or sugar snap peas. These little chips that you see here are actually chickpea chips that I made using a dehydrator at home with all sorts of seeds and chickpeas, and peanut butter nut seed spreads on celery or apples, roasted chickpeas, tofu fingers, trail mix, all of that stuff. So what are the most healthful plant protein sources? Whole plant foods, for sure. Unprocessed or minimally processed legumes are our best choices. Cooked legumes and, you know, edamame, sprouted legumes like sprouted peas, lentils, or mung beans, tofu, tempeh, unsweetened soy milk, peanuts, peanut butter, unprocessed or minimally processed nuts or seeds, or nut or seed butters, intact whole grains, and fresh peas are all good choices. The least healthful choices are highly processed foods with added fat, salt, sugar. They can all increase disease risk. For disease prevention and reversal, we want to avoid deep fried foods like deep fried tofu or tempeh, fried veggie meats, highly sweetened dishes with sugary sauces. And we definitely want to limit our intake of veggie meats. Many are high in fat and salt. If we're using them once in a while, we want to be selective, compare labels, and just use them less often. Make our own at home using whole foods. Is soy safe? Well, doesn't soy cause man boobs and infertility? Doesn't it increase the risk of breast cancer? Well, when it comes to these issues, these claims are made based on 2 cases of people that were consuming 12 to 20 servings of soy a day. Extensive clinical trials show no effect of soy or soy isoflavones on testosterone or estrogen levels in men, even when their intake exceeds typical Japanese intakes. And we have more limited but consistent clinical evidence that there's no adverse effects of soya or isoflavones on sperm or semen parameters. And with breast cancer, many experts once believed that phytoestrogens in soy could increase breast cancer risk, but evidence has confirmed that soy is likely protective against breast cancer, especially for those who consumed soy during childhood and adolescence. There's suggestive evidence that soy may reduce the risk of recurrence and mortality in those that have been diagnosed with breast cancer. Soy may also protect against prostate cancers, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, kidney disease, bone loss, and symptoms of menopause. And soy is not necessary in a plant-based diet, but it can be a helpful addition. We want to select mostly less processed organic soy foods like edamame, tofu, tempeh, miso, natto, and soy milk. Reasonable intakes are thought to be 2 to 4 servings a day for adults and 1 to 2 for children. So do plant protein sources offer any health advantages compared to animal protein sources? And the answer is a definite yes. Plant protein reduces morbidity and mortality compared to animal protein. And if we look at the studies, there was a study from 2016 that actually quantified this impact very nicely. And what they found is replacing just 3% of calories, that's 60 calories, it's less than 1 egg, in a 2,000 calorie diet would result in 34% reduction in mortality if what we replace is processed red meat, 19% if what we replace is eggs, 12% if what we replace is red meat, 8% for dairy, and 6% for poultry and fish. Then another study out of Japan, again replacing 3% of calories from meat with plant protein, reduced total mortality if what we were replacing was red meat by 34%, and if it was processed meat by 46%. And for cancer mortality, 42% for red meat, 50% for processed meat. Unbelievable. And then another study, over 400,000 individuals followed for 16 years, same deal, replacing 3% of calories from animal protein, 24% reduction when what we replace is eggs for male, 21% for females, 13% for males, 15% for females with red meat, 8% with dairy for both, and white meat was 2% for males and 5% for females. And what they found is replacing 3% of animal protein with plant protein reduced overall mortality 3%. So, or 10%. Imagine if we replaced 30% of animal protein with plant protein. Another study of over 6,000 individuals found high protein intakes greater than 20% of calories, increased mortality 75%, and increased the risk of dying from cancer or diabetes 4 times. The associations, however, were abolished or greatly attenuated when the protein came from plants. Now, this was a part of the study that kind of was surprising for me. Protein actually appeared protective for those 66 plus. In older adults, compared with those eating high protein intakes, more than 20% of calories, those with low protein intakes, less than 10% of calories, had higher risk for overall and cancer mortality, although diabetes mortality was still lower for those individuals eating very low protein. And in older adults, the authors concluded it appears that protein intakes of at least 10% of calories are necessary to reduce age-dependent weight loss, sarcopenia, and excessive loss of IGF-1 and frailty. Do protein sources impact other chronic diseases? Absolutely. There was a study on cardiovascular disease that found heart failure risk was 251% greater in the highest versus lowest quintile of animal protein intake and 56% lower in the highest versus lowest intake of legumes. Another study on cancer reported a 31% increase in overall cancer risk and a 79% increase in breast cancer risk in the highest versus lowest quintile of red meat intake. And then for diabetes, there was a study from Finland that reported type 2 diabetes dropped 18% when just 1% of calories from animal protein were replaced with plant protein. That's 20 calories in a 2,000 calorie diet. So why the advantage with plant protein? Well, they offer the advantage because they're higher in protective dietary components that are associated with reduced risk of chronic disease, and they're low in potentially pathogenic components that are associated with increased risk of chronic disease. And when we think of the protective factors like fiber, phytochemicals, antioxidants, plant sterols, plant stanols, pre and probiotics, plant protein sources are loaded with these components, but they're very low in they don't have the excessive saturated fat, trans fats, new 5GC, TMAO, pro-oxidants, environmental contaminants, products of high temperature cooking, and endotoxins. So if you look at legumes versus meat, when you look at the protective components, they're all high or very high in legumes, and they're all absent virtually absent in meat. And when you look at the stuff that increases risk of disease, there's nothing in the legumes. They're either low or zero, whereas in meat, it's generally moderate to high. And if we look at red meat and mortality, it doesn't matter if it's processed, unprocessed, total red meat, it's consistently associated with increased risk of mortality, whereas legumes are consistently increased with reduced mortality. This study showed a drop of 6% for every just over quarter cup of legume intake. And this study, which was shocking, of people over 70, for every 20 grams or 2/3 of an ounce, I think that's about less than 2 tablespoons of legumes, there was a 7 to 8% reduction in mortality. Based on that study, eating a cup of beans would reduce mortality 60 to 68%. And of course, the acid test is the blue zones, the places where people live the longest, healthiest lives, and the common lifestyle practices in the blue zones, you know about, but they all consume legumes. So protein-rich plant foods put a lid on the drivers of chronic disease. Protein-rich plant foods promote a healthy gut microbiome. They lower LDL cholesterol and blood pressure. They stabilize blood glucose. They increase satiety. They reduce caloric density and support healthy body weights. They reduce inflammation and oxidative stress. And we have clear, consistent evidence that people need to eat more plant-based foods and fewer animal-based foods. And national and international health authorities agree with this. The World Health Organization's 12 steps to healthy eating. Step number 1 is to eat a nutritious diet based on a variety of foods originating mainly from plants rather than animals. And international leaders, this is from the FAO, Plates, Pyramids, and Planet. They actually highlighted the international leaders that were really advocating plant foods. Germany, choose mostly plant-based foods. Brazil, eat foods mainly of plant origin. Qatar, emphasize plant-based diet. UK, eat more plant-based foods. And then we see it with cancer organizations, American Cancer Society, eat a healthy diet with an emphasis on plant foods. World Cancer Research Fund, eat mostly foods of plant origin. The American Institute of Cancer Research, choose mostly plant foods. So it's just like a broken record. Eat Lancet Commission, the Universal Healthy Reference Diet increases consumption of healthy foods, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, and nuts, and decreases consumption of unhealthy foods, red meat, sugar, refined grains. Even Canada's Food Guide, the 2019 rendition, you can see it's half the plate is fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, and a quarter protein-rich foods. But they say choose protein foods that come from plants every day. Plant protein foods can provide more fiber and less saturated fat than other types of protein foods. And you don't need to eat large amounts of protein foods to meet your nutritional needs. And finally, I just want to conclude the presentation with a very brief look at benefits beyond ourselves. Plant protein sources are more ecologically sustainable. If you look at the carbon footprint of various diets, it goes from the sort of upper of the keto diet to paleo to omnivore to pescatarian to vegetarian to vegan. On average, keto diets produce 4.2 times greater carbon footprint footprints than vegan diets. And there are 5 main indicators of environmental impact: greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water pollution, water use, and acidifying emissions. And if you look at these charts, you can see animal flesh products are in red, dairy in yellow, and plant foods in green. And you can see the highest greenhouse gas emissions are with animal products. Beef herd produces 30 times more greenhouse gas emissions than tofu. Similar story for land use. Beef herd uses 105 times more land than tofu. Water pollution, same song and dance. Beef herd causes 50 times more water pollution than tofu. And water use, the one exception is nuts. Nuts have by far the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, but they do use a little more water. But beef herd uses 18 times more water than tofu. Acidifying emissions, again, beef herd uses 40 times more acidifying emissions than tofu. And all the top emitters are animal products. And then in terms of being ethically justifiable, we're slaughtering 200 million land animals for food every day. It's over 70 billion per year, and over 90% are raised in CAFOs. And in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense to cause such pain, suffering, and death in other living beings when it's not only unnecessary, but it harms us and it harms the planet. So by getting our protein from plants, we all win. And we have a choice when we consider the consequences of our food choices, not just for ourselves, but beyond ourselves. Getting protein from plants becomes, to me, both an ecological and an ethical imperative. And that's the new book, Plant-Powered Protein. And I thank you very much. And I will stop my share. And I'm so sorry I went over a little bit, but there we go.
No need to apologize. That was wonderful. If everybody could please put some applause in the chat. You know how to make the little applause. We'd love to see that since we can't hear you. Here comes.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. That was amazing. Thank you so much. There will be a test. Nobody leaves until they fill out their little blue book with a test in it, please. I'm going to just quickly share. Maybe I'm not. Let's see here. Here we go. Whoops. We're going to have a Q&A session now, and I'm going to do a quick reminder to can you see that? Bob, is it showing up? Okay. Bob, have I got the right screen? Facilitated programs? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yep, once again, we run 3 ACLM, American College of Lifestyle Medicine, ACLM certified programs at Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. Our monthly Jumpstart program, which is a medically facilitated 2-week Esselstyn-style nutritional intervention. Of course, it's very low-fat, whole food, plant-based, just for those 2 weeks. After that, we encourage people to experiment a little bit. With higher fat plant foods. I'm just putting that in there so Brenda Davis will not think that we advocate that forever. That's just how we get people started. And that includes 7 facilitated Zoom sessions for a total of 11 hours, daily emails, support in the Google Classroom, and then cooking demo, and so 7 meetings. It's really a lot of fun. We have a great time doing that. The Lift Project, created by Darren Morton in Australia, is a 10-week program that helps lift people's moods. It's a wonderful program, especially for people who aren't really ready to make a big dietary change. If there are just too many other things going on in their life, we recommend the Lift Project. And then the grandparent of all of these lifestyle medicine programs is CHIP, which is now called Pivio, and we also run that as a facilitated program. So we'd love it if you'd sign up for those, and you can also check out what we do at various places. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, which by the way, this video will, a video of this presentation of Brenda's will be on our YouTube channel in a few days, and you'll be notified of that. And you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I will now stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce our medical student, Alan Tsai, if you would like to turn your video on. Alan is a second-year medical student at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, and is still trying to decide what kind of specialty he would like to go into, some kind of primary care or maybe sports medicine. Hello, Alan.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Barnett.
Absolutely. Now you're going to be managing our Q&A with a little help from me. So where would you like to start?
I guess we'll start right at the top with that first question from Julie. She asked, how does the RDA for amino acids compare to the RDA for protein? And she's wondering if they're one and the same.
Oh, no, they're not. So the RDA for protein is the total grams of protein that we require per day, or that 97 to 98% of the population would be covered for a day. Whereas the essential amino acids are very specific. So let's say you need 50 grams of protein, and all you get is 50 grams of protein. The RDA for essential amino acids tells you how many milligrams of each of those essential amino acids you would need per gram of protein to ensure you get sufficient. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Brenda, I'm just going to ask Brenda a question myself. How do they decide what the RDA is? Did they do some like deficiency studies, or how did they figure it out?
The RDA, they bring together experts from from many different realms, and then they review the evidence, and it's a very thorough review of the evidence, and certainly not everyone agrees. And even, and actually a lot of people don't realize this, but it's jointly done, Canada and the US together. So there'll be Canadian scientists and American scientists. And so it's quite an impressive team for each nutrient, and then a complete lit review, and then, discussions and to come to, these determinations.
Got it. Thanks. All right, Alan, what do we got next?
All right. I'll jump to a question from Joanne. I apologize in advance if I'm butchering any of these names, but she asks, what additional considerations or plant foods are needed for those who must maintain both a soy-free and a gluten-free diet?
Yeah, so that's, it's obviously more challenging the more foods you have to eliminate, because of course in a 100% plant-based diet we're already eliminating quite a lot of foods. And so if you eliminate soy is one of the sort of highest quality plant protein foods, and then if you have to eliminate gluten as well, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. You've still got a ton of things to rely on. So lentils are a fantastic source of protein. All legumes are amazing sources of protein. And then, of course, seeds. A lot of people don't realize what exceptional sources of protein, especially hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds. And so they, relying on those kinds of foods can help a lot. And then even if you're, you could use pea milk, for example, instead of soy milk. But if you prefer to have something like almond milk, one thing that you can do is I have done this for years, is I just blend some hemp seeds in with my almond milk to boost the protein and nutritional value, essential fatty acids and vitamins and minerals. So that's another option. But don't worry if you choose not to or can't eat soy and gluten. There are lots and lots of other places you can turn.
Great. While Alan is looking for the next question, Brenda, what's your opinion on smoothies? And are there different kinds of smoothies?
Yeah, so my opinion on smoothies is they can be wonderful foods for athletes, especially, who need a lot of calories. And it's a large volume of food when you have to eat 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. And so sometimes the smoothies, when you blend up a lot of calories into a small area, it can make getting those calories and nutrients a lot easier. And some athletes do use protein powders for, to further boost protein. I don't think that's necessary for most people, but it can be helpful for some people. And so I don't think we should discount them completely, because they do have their place at times. And I would just be very careful with the selection. But what I do, I think protein powders generally don't taste very good. And so if I'm wanting to add protein to a smoothie, I don't really have smoothies much, because I like eating too much. And I can't afford like that kind of number of calories. So I will have a big salad instead. But my husband loves to have a smoothie once in a while. So I will do, what I add is hemp seeds, soy milk, and frozen peas to boost the protein in his smoothie. I don't ever use protein powder, so you can just use whole foods to do that. Now, for smoothies for people who are fighting disease, to me, a smoothie would then be a meal replacement. And for some people who have a lot of food addictions, when you say, okay, all you're going to eat for 2 weeks is, a little bit of a smoothie in the, evening, that's your dinner meal, or that's, one of your meals for the day. It can make it easier for them not to stray from the guidelines. So it can have an application for that kind of thing. But generally, I would say for people who are trying to lose weight, it's better to eat your food because it's more satiating to chew and to swallow and to have that big volume of food as opposed to sucking back a smoothie. And again, there are, for pregnant women, for people who are having a hard time because they're nauseated, it could be helpful. And for people with cancer, and there are a number but again, I think we need to remember smoothies should be mainly vegetables and some seeds. Some people even add legumes, which is absolutely fine if it tastes okay to you. Not too many fruits, and definitely no juice added. Do not add juice. You don't need it. And I would say add a fortified non-dairy milk to boost nutrients further.
Great, thank you. Alan, what's next?
Great. Well, we have a question from Melissa. So she asks, can you speak on continuous glucose monitors with regards to non-diabetic populations and athletes using it more mainstream? How do we counsel these patients and let them know it's okay to see a small transient increase in glucose after eating these fruits, whole grains, and unrefined carbs? Because some of her patients are now choosing low carb, low fruit, high fat, high protein foods to keep their glucose levels more flatline.
This is a really tough one. I haven't dealt with it a lot, but I think that people, to me, what they need to realize is that flatlining glucose isn't the goal. The goal is to reverse insulin resistance, to ensure inflammation is kept down, oxidative stress is kept down, to ensure that we have a good gut microbiome. What we're striving for is health. And when you eat in that way and you're flatlining your glucose, you're doing it at the expense of all of those things, those drivers of disease, lipotoxicity, dysbiosis, inflammation, oxidative stress. And so what you want is you want to choose foods that really put a lid on those drivers, that promote a healthy gut microbiome, that reduce inflammation, that do all of those good things. And so the focus, and you can, explain to them that the research is really clear on this in terms of morbidity and mortality. The more fruits and vegetables, the more whole grains, the more legumes we consume, the better we do. The more meat we consume, the more of these non-carbohydrate animal products we consume, the worse we do. So the goal is health. The goal is not flatlining blood glucose or just, getting skinny. The goal, we can do that by, all sorts of horrible things. The goal is health. And so those are the things we need to think about.
Great, thanks. What's next, Alan?
All right, we have a
Brenda,
question.
how are you holding out? You okay?
Oh, I'm good. I'm
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
Okay, all that plant-powered energy.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. We'll keep these questions rolling then.
You bet.
All right, we have a question asking, is quinoa considered a grain, a seed, a legume? Is it a good substitute for white rice? And is there any bad effect if you eat too much quinoa? And how much can you eat per serving for a normal weight adult?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. So quinoa is actually what we know as a pseudo grain. So it's technically not a grain, but it's used as a grain, and its nutritional value. Most pseudo grains have have better nutrition than true grains, and it's one of those. And so it tends to be higher in minerals like calcium and magnesium and so forth than other grains. And it contains more protein as well than some other grains. It's actually not quite as high as kamut and spelt per cup because it's a little lighter and fluffier. But it's a wonderful, wonderful choice. It's an exceptional substitute for white rice. So much better than white rice. Now, if you want the best of the best in quinoa, choose a colored quinoa. So it's, in legumes and grains, when you can get a colored, black rice is better than white rice, red rice is better than white rice, even brown rice is better than white rice. But in quinoa, you can get tricolored quinoa, you can get red quinoa and brown quinoa or black quinoa, and they all have a little bit more of these phytochemicals that provide color to food, which is wonderful. You can eat too much of almost anything, but you probably aren't going to eat too much quinoa, and a cup is a very reasonable amount for a normal weight healthy adult. If someone is trying to who's very overweight, who's on a strict weight loss diet, they may want to do a half a cup serving instead of a full cup. But for a healthy, normal weight adult, a cup is a very reasonable serving.
Excellent. What's next, Alan?
Great. We have a question asking, can you review some of the physical signs common with nutritional deficiencies in plant-based eaters who aren't eating enough calories from protein, or those transitioning from a standard American diet?
Yeah, so some of the things that I guess I'll just stick to protein since that's our topic for today. But some, and many plant-based of our experts will say they've never seen a protein deficiency. And we don't see kwashiorkor, we don't see severe protein deficiencies really in North America, or very rarely it would be in someone with severe anorexia nervosa or something like that. But it's a serious disease, kwashiorkor or marasmus. We don't see that. But I can't say I've never seen symptoms of insufficient protein intake. I've seen them many times. And in fact, what I generally see is it's usually seniors who are losing their hair. They're having problems with their skin. They're aging more rapidly than they would. Their skin seems to be aging more rapidly. Their nails, all of it. They're seeing negative sort of health of those things, hair falling out and so forth. And then the other thing you see often is their immune system. The wounds don't heal as well. They get sick more often. They feel weak. They're losing muscle mass. They have sarcopenia. They may even get stress fractures. Their mood may shift. And I actually just dealt with a lady that had a lot of those issues. She was eating about 30 grams of protein a day. We got her into a healthier range, and she could not believe how much better she felt and how things were starting to turn around for her. And so we do see this, and it's more common than what a lot of us would like to think it is. But in seniors, they often do eat very small amounts and are focused on familiar foods like the tea and toast kind of idea. And so for those sorts of people, it can really make a difference to boost protein.
How would you boost protein in that situation? Something like tofu, or what would you
Yeah,
use?
so in that situation, what I generally do is I find out exactly what they're eating for breakfast, lunch, dinner, if they eat any snacks, what they're drinking, and I look at their total diet, analyze it, see exactly how much protein they're getting. And then if they tell me, well, I eat a bowl of flaked cereal with almond milk for breakfast, well, we switch the almond milk to unsweetened soy milk. We do a higher, a higher protein cereal. So what I often do is I cook lentils in with my oat groats and kamut berries and so forth. So I might add some that way, and then sprinkle on, a seed mix, hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds and so on. And so we bring the protein from 5 or 6 grams to 20 grams pretty easily doing that. And then we go to lunch, and if they're having a salad at lunch, we look at, adding some little tofu cubes and some nuts or seeds and a dressing made with tahini and hemp seeds blended, and just infusing protein in that way. And then we do the same at dinner, making sure that there's some legumes at that dinner meal, that it's not just pasta and tomato sauce with a few veggies thrown in, that they've got some sort of source of more concentrated protein source. Even if we just switch the pasta to a legume pasta, for example, we go from 5 to 20 grams of protein, just like that. So it's actually not that difficult, and yeah, it can help a lot.
Thank you. Alan, what's next?
Great. Our next
We're on a roll
question.
here.
Yeah, our next question is kind of related to the question asked previously about the quinoa, but someone was wondering, for those with proteinuria, is it okay to eat a cup of quinoa per serving since it has high protein? Or should these patients limit their protein intake? Or as long as it's plant protein, it should be okay for these patients?
Yeah, well, for people who have kidney disease, we have a number of plant-based experts, kidney disease experts who have really looked at these questions. And one of the things we know is that when you eat plant protein, it's way less hard on the kidneys than animal-based protein. And you see improvements in all the markers of kidney function when you switch from animal protein to plant protein. And a cup of quinoa is about 8 grams of protein. It's not a hugely concentrated protein source. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. The more concentrated protein sources in the plant kingdom would be things like tofu, and of course the concentrated protein foods like veggie meats. If people are eating veggie meats, they're much more concentrated. And so things like quinoa, not a problem at all. Grains aren't, or pseudo grains for that matter, aren't, problematic in that regard.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to answer. There's a question in here. What's the average protein grams per day in the Jumpstart program? I'm going to ask Brenda to help me out here, but I'm going to do a rough calculation and just say that it's somewhere between 10 and 15% calories from protein. We don't really know. It's whole food plant-based, and we don't want you consuming processed food or sugars or oil. So I'm guessing it's between 10 and 15%. So if it's 15% calories from protein and you're taking in 2,000 calories, it's going to be 75 grams of protein, because it's right. Basically,
yeah, and exactly. And so it'll depend a little bit on how you slant your diet. So if you're having a few more legumes, they're 20 to 40% of calories from protein, as opposed to more of the grains, which are a little bit lower in protein. But that's if you're doing Jumpstart, you may be eating a little bit fewer calories than 2,000. I don't know, depending on your body weight and how much you're trying to lose. But yes, if you're eating, see, that's the thing that's really interesting. What dilutes protein in a whole food plant-based diet in a plant-based diet, I should say, is oil and sugar. They have no protein. And so if you're eating more processed foods that contain a lot of oil and sugar, you're diluting the protein in your diet. If you're getting 2,000 calories from truly whole plant foods, the vegetables and fruits and nuts, or where you're not having nuts and seeds in the beginning of Jumpstart, but in the grains and the legumes, your protein is probably going to be in the neighborhood of 15%, or very close to it.
Could even be higher. I mean, if
it could even be higher.
Legumes are all in the 20s, vegetables are in the 30s. Right?
Vegetables, yeah, they range from about 10 to 40, but a lot of them are in the 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, and then grains are going to be 14 or 15% calories.
Yeah, a lot of them are in that range. Rice is a little lower; it's closer to the 7, but we don't tend not to focus on rice as much. We tend to focus on oats and barley and kamut berries and quinoa and so forth. And they're all significantly higher in that 12 to 17% range.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. It's a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that.
Yeah, really good question.
Go ahead, Alan.
Great. Our next question asks, does powdered soy milk lose its nutritional value / protein density?
Does powdered soy milk? Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not really very familiar with powdered soy milk, but I would say that in the powdering process, I would expect some nutrients to be lost, such as some of the B vitamins, but not the minerals, and not the protein. So I would think that it's still got a reasonable nutritional value, but I've actually never compared it. It'd be interesting to go to the US database and just look at the nutrients compared to the other type of soy milk. I haven't done that, so that's a good one. Thank you for that.
So I'm going to make an executive decision here. It's 8:56. We're going to call it at 9 o'clock exactly Eastern time. And I'm so grateful to Brenda Davis for doing this. But keep going, Alan. We got maybe one or two more.
All right, let's see what I can squeeze in here in these last couple minutes. We have a question asking, is there a generalized test to assess the type of protein deficiency someone may have, especially someone who's self-taught on eating a more plant-based diet?
Yeah, I wish I could say yes, there's an easy, you do a serum albumin or a total protein, but they vary with, those kinds of tests will be affected by inflammation in the body and other things. So there's not really, it's probably better to have an assessment looking at your overall health, and your protein intake is probably the best way to go.
Okay, one more, Alan.
Okay, we have one last question asking, what can I do to get my basic amounts of protein in if I have to avoid all middle and high level purine foods?
Whoa.
That's an interesting question. What's really interesting is a lot of the sort of purine information on legumes, suggesting legumes are, to be avoided, are looking at dry legumes. And when you actually look at cooked legumes, they're very moderate, very moderate sources, not nearly as high as meat, not nearly as high as seafood, that's for sure. And so I think even with purine restriction, I can remember working with a man who had gout 7-8 times a year. It was just chronic gout. When he was on a sort of standard American diet, we switched him to a whole food plant-based diet, never an incidence of gout again, and he consumed plenty of legumes. So I think legumes definitely can fit in, nuts and seeds and whole grains, they can all fit in. I mean, you can look at purine content a little bit and moderate intakes a little bit, but generally, these are diseases of kings. They're diseases of people that are eating usually generally very high animal food diets.
Great answer. Well, Brenda, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience?
Well, I'm just so excited that there are so many people interested in eating plant-based. I was just so excited to hear about the numbers of people that are doing that have gone through your program. And I really want to encourage people. This is, I think, what we really have to do as human beings. We need to move in this direction, not just for ourselves, but for our grandchildren. And so thank you all for what you're doing, for getting educated, and for living this way. So I'm so grateful. I've been doing this for 35 years, and 35 years ago, I would have never imagined we would be where we are today. So I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. Alan,
thank you.
Alan, thank you for your help. Bob, Frankie in the background, thank you for engineering, and thank you to all the staff of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. And thank you all for attending tonight. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.